Cultural Studies, Multiculturalism, and Media Culture by Douglas Kellner. We are immersed from a very early age to the grave in media and consumer society, and thus it is important to learn how to understand, interpret, and criticize its meanings and messages. The media are a profound and often misperceived source of cultural pedagogy. Media teaches us in terms of how to conform to the dominant systems of norms, values, practices, and institutions. Identities are formed by cultural artifacts and texts, and some of them from the media. Media shape our view of the world and our deepest desires. Media shapes our identities and creates an us versus them system. Media demonstrates who have power and who does not. It legitimizes power. Cultural form serves either to further social domination or to enable people to resist and struggle against domination. We can see and dissect the media to understand who is powerful and who is powerless. Media literacy is a valuable tool to learn how to navigate our cultural environment. Learning how to read, criticize, and resist social cultural manipulation can help one empower oneself in relation to dominant forms of media and culture. We all have different readings or interpretations of media text based upon our positionalities or a multitude of identities. These readings are critical assessments. They could be political rather than just simply aesthetic valuations. Now again, understanding media literacy and utilizing it gives us the power to resist the power and domination of the dominant ideology. Cultural studies is a set of approaches to the study of culture, society, and politics. Cultural studies is the use of critical methods for the analysis, interpretation, and criticism of cultural artifacts. This field also focuses on how various audiences interpreted and used media culture differently, analyzing the factors that made different audiences respond in contrast ways to various media texts, and how they made use of media in their personal and social lives in a multiplicity of ways. Cultural studies insist that culture must be studied within the social relations and system through within culture is produced and consumed. That means we must take into consideration society as a whole and politics and the economy of a cultural system when making our interpretations of media text. Mainstream media articulates or expresses dominant ideology. However, we can use hegemony, again a term coined by Antonio Gramsci, to resist this. Hegemony conceives of U.S. culture and society in contested terrain, with various groups and ideologies struggling for dominance. Counter-hegemonic products are aimed at social transformation and attempted to specify forces of domination and resistance to aid the process of political struggle and emancipation from oppression and domination. A critical cultural studies approach also specifies how people can resist the dominant encoded meanings and produce their own critical and alternative readings and media artifacts, as well as new identities and social relations. Ideologies make inequalities and subordination appear natural and just, and thus induce consent to relations of domination. Multiculturalism affirms the worth of different types of culture and cultural groups, claiming that oppressed and marginalized voices have their own validity and importance. Cultural studies promotes a critical multiculturalist politics and media pedagogy that aims to make people sensitive to how relations of power and domination are encoded in cultural texts and how technology can be used for oppositional, pedagogical, or political purposes. It is important to stress the importance of analyzing cultural text within their system of production and distribution, often referred to as the political economy of culture. The system of production often determines, in part, what sorts of artifacts will be produced, what structural limits will determine what can and cannot be said and shown, and what sorts of audience effects the text may generate. Production is shaped by economic, technical, aesthetic, and cultural considerations. Certain forms of media text are continually produced mainly due to profit. Genres that are familiar and popular with audiences have spin-offs such as sequels, television series, and products used to market the brand. Products are created by relatively rigid generic codes formulaic conventions, and well-defined ideological boundaries. Ideologies are disseminated through media text. Media is a tool used by powerful corporate groups to win control of the state and the mainstream media. Global networks produce and distribute culture in the interest of profit and corporate hegemony. Instead of being an ideological state apparatus, we're using an informal way, or it's a soft power in using ideologies to control the masses. And it's not just about the US, it's a global issue as well. Our media is distributed across the globe, and so our ideologies become a dominant force across nations. Now we'll talk about textual analysis. How do we actually read media text? Quantitative content analysis counts the number of images. Content analysis applies various critical theories to unpack the meanings of the text or explain how text functioned to produce meanings. Semiotics is a system for investigating the creation of meaning not only in written languages but also in other nonverbal codes, such as the visual and auditory languages of TV. Semiotics analyzes how linguistic and non-linguistic cultural signs form systems of meanings. And now let's talk about how audiences receive media culture. All texts are subject to multiple readings depending on the perspectives and subject positions of the reader, their particular identities. Media culture provides materials for individuals and communities to create identities and meanings. Ethnographic cultural studies recognizes how audiences use media text for empowerment. One of the merits of cultural studies is that it focuses on audience reception and fan appropriation, and this focus provides one of its major contributions. Take some time to reflect on these questions and examine the social identity wheel and fill it out yourself. Here are the questions. Which part of the wheel is easiest to fill out? And I'll talk about the categories now, or list them now. We have religion, ethnicity, ability, nationality, language, age, race, and class. And of course, there's other types of identities we could list here as well. But which one is easiest to fill out? Which part of the wheel is the most difficult to fill out? Are there important aspects of your identity that do not fit the wheel? Were you surprised by any of the categories in the wheel? How would you explain your identity to a stranger? What parts of your identities do you love? What parts of your identities give you challenges? What do you want others to know about you? What stereotypes of one of your identities do you want to dismantle? So how do we make cultural studies better? A cultural studies that's critical, multicultural, and multi-perspectival. Cultural studies, in particular textual studies, should use an intersectional approach that sees the importance of analyzing the dimensions of layered identities within the text of media culture, while also studying their impact on how audiences read and interpret media culture. We should see that cultural studies attacks oppression and texts that promote any kind of oppression. Media text should be interpreted within the context of their production and reception. An audience can interpret media text according to their own political and representation struggles. Cultural studies is thus part of a critical media pedagogy that enables individuals to resist manipulation and increase their freedom and individuality. It can empower people to gain sovereignty over their culture and struggle for alternative cultures and political change.